Hey everybody, it's me. Um, I wanted to. I promised a video today. I wanted to talk a little bit about um, boycotts and why boycotting Georgia is stupid. Um, so I need to qualify my statement a little bit and say that there's two dynamics going on here. Boycott Georgia was about boycotting events and filming and kind of, we'll say, um, less tangible things that are occurring in Georgia. So people calling for film companies to stop you. Georgia is huge in film industry right now. Marvel does a ton of stuff in Georgia. AMC does a ton of stuff in Georgia. It's a huge location for filming for Hollywood right now because it presents as rustic and lots of areas that are kind of out in a way that they can get to. And Georgia, I'm sure, has provided some benefit to the companies for doing that. So that's a big part of it is, boycott Marvel, or Disney using Georgia as a filming location, but it's also, they want boycott the Masters. Don't have the Masters in Augusta, which is kind of silly because that's where the Masters is played. But and then there's the second piece of it, which is boycott companies that are in Georgia that didn't do enough. So we're going to address both of these, and I'll try to keep this as short as I can. It's a complicated subject, and I want to touch on some of the things I've already said on Twitter. So let's address the easy one first. Boycott Georgia. Boycott the state. Boycotting the state is ridiculous. Protesting and getting your voice heard I'm all for it. But when you protest the state of Georgia and you don't want filming to happen there, you don't want events to happen there, what you're really doing is affecting the people who make their living off of those events, and not really affecting the state. And the state loses some tax revenue that happens because of those events being in the state, but the state can run at a deficit. The state is going to cut needed services when it doesn't have the tax money to do those things. You're not hurting the politicians, although it can drive the people of Georgia to vote for people that won't do this to the economy. But I want you to understand that this is something that can be weaponized against Democrats. Democrats pushing for boycotting the state, Democratic forces, not Democrats generally, people who are liberal pushing to boycott events in the state, the GOP looks at this and is just salivating. Look, we can blame the layoffs and blame the loss in revenue and then blame the loss in services because of the loss in tax revenue on Democrats who boycotted the state and didn't want anything to happen here. And that's exactly what they want to happen. They want that to happen because it gives them ammunition. I don't want to say they want it to happen. I think they don't care because it gives them ammunition to use against Democrats. What we need to be doing is elevating the Democrat voices in the state, people like Stacey Abrams, who are working to fight the Republicans on policy. This policy is a bad policy, and it's going to affect more than just people of color. It's going to affect urban white workers who can't get to the polls or have to wait in line and can't hand a bottle of water to somebody. There are other people that this is going to affect, and they either don't care or they don't realize that this is going to impact them the way that it will. Now, Delta made a statement about this, and I'll get back to the statement in a second. But there are other provisions in this bill that, they are requiring an ID for you to register to vote by mail. But you have to provide proof of residence, not necessarily photo ID, but proof of residence. If they make photo IDs free, I don't have a problem with it. My problem with photo IDs is that they aren't free, and it becomes a poll tax, which is a violation of the Constitution. You can't have poll taxes. It was deemed, they made an amendment just for that, 24th Amendment, 22nd Amendment, somewhere in that range, because they used it to keep poor people from voting. And poor, at the time, meant African American. So they were trying to keep poor people from voting, and so you had to pay to go and vote, and so they put a stop to that. If you require something that requires people to pay in order to vote, then that's a poll tax. You can't do that, and it would be fought, and it would be struck down. This isn't about the state saying we get to make our own laws. It's they can't make a law that violates the Constitution. However, if they provide IDs free of charge, go get an ID and vote. Like, it's not a big deal. But there are other things that happen in this legislation. We're focusing on the negative. There are other things that, there that were done in this bill that were popular. This bill isn't hugely unpopular. It's unpopular with certain groups, obviously, for obvious reasons. I'm not saying it's a good bill. I'm saying that they tried to put good things in it to make it seem less bad. It is still bad, and it still needs to be changed. But boycotting the state of Georgia is not going to change that. Now, you can get the people in Georgia to elevate their voices, get them heard, and support people running for local elections in Georgia. I'm not talking about Georgia, the senators in Georgia. They did a great job, but they have this much influence on voting laws in the state of Georgia. This much, none. You want to change the voting laws in Georgia? You have to elevate local state offices in Georgia. You have to get Democrats in the Georgia State House. That's where this is happening. You have to get a Democrat in the governor's office. That's how this changes. We can't do this with senators and a House of Representatives, congressmen. This doesn't change there. This changes at the local level. And here's the thing about local elections. They don't get the press. They don't get the coverage. They don't get the money that national elections get. And as a result of that, those there's not as many voices being heard, and so people tend to vote with what they're comfortable with. And they have fewer people telling them what to do in the local elections. And I voted for the Republican here, I'll vote for the Republican here. A lot of people, when you start analyzing voting trends, a lot of people vote differently at the state level than they do at the national level. Intentionally. I do. Not all the time. But it depends on the election and what I'm voting for. So that said, please don't boycott the state of Georgia. You're not going to get the Masters change because, one, it's a bunch of rich white dudes. I don't care who's playing the game. The Augusta National golf course or whatever the fuck it's called, it's a bunch of old white dudes. They're not going to change the Masters because you don't like Georgia right now. It's just not going to happen. It's not going to happen. So quit. Stop. And one of the things people talk about North Carolina, let me tell you something about North Carolina. North Carolina, yes, the NCAA tournament, changing venues and stuff had an impact on tax revenue. But I'm telling you, it doesn't have the impact that you think it's going to have. You think, oh, people will be mad that they lost all this, the NCAA. No, what happens is they lose the tax revenue and then they have to make cuts. So they're going to cut state-provided Medicare. They're going to cut state, assistance programs, educational programs, because that's what your state taxes fund. It's not going to affect who runs for office. You have to elevate the voices standing against these people. Boycotting the state is not going to do you any good. The reason that HB 01, HB 02 got part of it rescinded is because it was wildly unpopular. And it was so unpopular, and the government refused to budge on it, even though it was unpopular. Those people ended up getting replaced, and the new administration came in and made changes, and the new legislature came in and made changes to the law. And they repealed part of HB 01, HB 02. That's not the same thing. That didn't happen because people were boycotting North Carolina. People in North Carolina were upset that this passed. They didn't want this, right? They didn't want this to happen, and they made a change. Now, I'm not saying that there wasn't an impact in the boycott had an impact in the state. I'm saying that the government didn't make the change, the people did. The people voted in new government, and the new government changed the law. Now, you could do that in Georgia, and you could boycott the state of Georgia in the hopes that the people in Georgia are pissed that the government's got to cut things, but that's not what's going to happen now. Because here's the other thing. That happened in the same election cycle that Trump happened, 2016. So the people in North Carolina made that change in 2016. You think that change would happen today? Probably not. The GOP is fundamentally different now than it was in 2016. Fundamentally different. Part 2. Boycotting businesses, and this is the part that I think is hilarious. I want you to... Here's what's ironic. Think about this for a second. We don't want big business in government. We don't want corporations having all of this say in what's going on. And you're mad at them because they didn't do enough to stop this from happening. Does that make sense? Does not make sense to me. Listen, you don't want to buy Coke products because you don't like Coke? Fine. You don't like what they did? That's fine too. You're calling for a boycott. You want other people not to buy Coke because you don't like what Coke did. I'm going to stand up and say, listen, you don't have to like Coke. You don't want to buy Coke, that's fine. But I'm here to tell you that that's not going to do what you think it's going to do. What you're trying to do is punish the people of Coca-Cola for not doing enough for you or what you think they should do. And so you're going to commit to an embargo. That's what a boycott of a product is. You're going to commit to an embargo, and you're going to get other people to join your embargo, and hopefully no one buys Coke anymore, and Coke is devastated and has to shut down and blah, 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 blah. Change. And if they lose enough money, they're going to put pressure on the Georgia. Listen, none of that's going to happen. It's just not. One, Coca-Cola is a multi-billion-dollar international company. While the United States business accounts for the majority of the business, and I'm not pulling up numbers here, I would count. If no one in the United States bought a Coke again, they would suffer. But they would not die. They would take a hit, obviously, but Coca-Cola would still survive. Presuming everyone else in the world still bought Coca-Cola. See, what a lot of you don't understand is that Coca-Cola is the most popular soft drink in the world. People in Europe and people in Asia that don't, well, I say Asia to a lesser degree. People in Europe don't like Pepsi because it's too sweet. So mostly they drink Coca-Cola because it's not quite as sweet of a drink as Pepsi is. So Coca-Cola is more prevalent worldwide than Pepsi. Now, other countries have their own sodas, but I'm here to tell you, Coca-Cola is probably the most popular soft drink in the world. And you're not going to shut it down with a boycott because you're not happy with something they did in the state that they happen to be from. And no, they're not going to move out of Georgia because that's the whole thing. It started in Georgia. Like, the guy that founded Coca-Cola is from Georgia. So it's natural that they would headquarter in Atlanta. Now, I don't know what Coca-Cola has said. I don't think they've said anything yet. At least I couldn't find anything. But I know that they didn't do anything. And you're mad at them because they didn't interfere in the process in such a way as to make the government of Georgia feel like that it would hurt them to pursue this bill because Coca-Cola is going to threaten to do what? Leave? Coca-Cola is probably not paying very much in tax to the state of Georgia. What would leaving do other than cost thousands of jobs? I won't say thousands. I'll say hundreds. Hundreds of jobs in Georgia when the headquarters moves somewhere else. Who did you hurt? Who did you hurt? You didn't hurt Coca-Cola. You didn't hurt Georgia. Because Georgia's going to go court someone else to come and fill that space and give them in tax abatement to do so. Coca-Cola is probably hardly paying any taxes in Georgia. Who did you hurt? You hurt the people who work for Coca-Cola. Now, boycotts typically don't lead to layoffs. That's not normally what happens. But what's your goal? Your goal is to make a statement. And there are better ways to make a statement than wasting your time telling people not to buy a product that they're going to buy anyway. How many people do you know eat Chick-fil-A every day? Okay, Let me rephrase that. How many people do you know eat Chick-fil-A? People eat Chick-fil-A every day. People I know who are gay eat Chick-fil-A regularly. The sandwich that comes with the side of hate. And they eat it all the time. Because it's delicious. That's you're never gonna overcome that, right? People are gonna still buy Coca-Cola because they like it. They don't like Pepsi. They don't like the alternatives. They like Coke. They're gonna still buy it. Now you don't have to buy Coke. I'm not telling you buy Coke. I'm saying it's stupid to get other people not to buy a product because you don't like what it stands for. Oh, but Goya Beans. Goya Beans is doing just fine. If anything, Goya Beans is selling more now than they sold before because people who never would have bought a Goya Bean bought it because you said to boycott it. That's how this division thing works. When you decide you don't like a thing, the other side's going to be like, well, we like it now. It's like Target. They decided they didn't like Target. We all went to Target. It doesn't make any sense. You're wasting energy trying to boycott stuff. Delta, let me tell you what Delta said. I'm going to read it off the screen here. Over the past several weeks, Delta engaged extensively with state elected officials of both parties, to express our strong view that Georgia must have a fair and secure election process. No one should disagree with that. With broad voter participation and equal access to the polls. No one should disagree with that. The legislation signed this week improved considerably during the legislative process and expands weekend voting, codifies Sunday voting, and protects a voter's ability to cast an absentee ballot without providing a reason. For the first time, drop boxes have also been authorized for all counties statewide, and poll workers will be allowed to work across county lines. Nonetheless, we understand concerns remain over the other provisions in the legislation, and there continues to be work ahead in this important effort. We are committed to continuing to listen to our people and our communities and engage with leaders from both parties to ensure every eligible employee and Georgia voter can exercise their right to vote. There's nothing in that statement to be pissed off about. Nothing. They didn't say, and I've seen people say this, they didn't say, well, we're for election integrity. Listen, we should be for election integrity. You don't like it because it's a hot button topic for the GOP, but everyone should want the elections to be secure. It's stupid to say otherwise. Just stupid. You're just pissed off because that's what the GOP says and you think it means X. No, what it means is having an election process that is indisputable. We should want that. Now, I'm not saying that means we need to have voter ID. I don't believe in voter ID. If you're going to make voter ID, you need to make photo IDs free. Free for everybody in the country. They should be provided by the state that requires it. If you made them free, and you made sure everyone could get access to get them, then you would have people out there making sure everybody that was eligible to vote, that wanted to vote, could get a photo ID. It would happen. We would make it happen, people. But it has to be free. If it's not free, it's a violation of the Constitution. I think there's nothing wrong with absentee voting. I have voted absentee. The president usually votes absentee. There's nothing wrong with absentee voting. As long as the people receiving the mail, they're only sending mail-in vote ballots to people who are registered to vote. I think they should make voting easier. You give mail-in ballots to everybody and let everybody vote by mail if they choose. And if you vote twice, you pay a fine and your extra vote is not counted. Don't vote twice. You're not allowed to. And if you find out you're doing it intentionally, throw you in jail. No, I don't think you should be able to carry someone else's ballot to the ballot box. Unless you have power of attorney for that person. If you have power of attorney for someone, you should be able to carry their ballot to the ballot box. Because clearly, if you have power of attorney for them, they're incapable of getting to the mailbox. Do I think they should have voting access at places where people may not be able to get out to vote? Yes, I do. I think they should have drop boxes easily accessible. There should be more drop boxes, not fewer. I'm for the things you guys are for. I'm just here to tell you that Delta is for them too. They just told you they are. Now, you don't like Delta? Fine. Fuck Delta. Delta ruined my airport. If I could get it by with that never flying on Delta again, I probably wouldn't. I wouldn't feel the need to. However, this is not the reason. This is not the reason, guys. You're mad that they didn't do enough. That they didn't use their power for the forces of good. Guys, we don't want them interfering. We've said it over and over again. I don't want corporations having a say in what happens in legislation. It's our voices that are supposed to be heard. And they get a voice individually. And now they get two. They get two voices because not only are the rich and influential more influential than us, but now they get to do it again as the business. And that's stupid. We don't want that. We don't want Coca-Cola and Delta putting pressure on somebody, and you're only okay with it because it's for what you want. What if they were leaning the other way? Then you'd be really mad. I mean, you're this mad, and you don't even know, like, you think that they haven't done enough. Imagine how pissed you'd be if they were leaning the other way. Goya beans is a great example. No one buy Goya beans. Who does that hurt? Doesn't hurt the CEO of Goya beans. Well, he's going to lose a couple $1 million. Who do you think that hurts? Where do you think that trickles down? Because you know what what really does trickle down? Losses at the company. Here's what happens. Let's say you guys succeed. Let's say Delta Airlines starts to go bankrupt. Because no one will fly Delta because of this. What do you think will happen? Delta CEO gets fired. Gets a multi-million-dollar severance package. And then goes and becomes CEO of another company somewhere. He came out smelling like a fucking rose. Second thing that happens is Delta needs to hire a new CEO and restructure itself. And to do that, they need to dump a whole bunch of assets. They need to sell off some stuff so they make the fleet smaller. Who do you think that hurts? Smaller fleet, fewer mechanics, fewer pilots, fewer flight attendants, fewer people working at airports because there are fewer planes. Delta may not survive, but it didn't hurt any of the people who made the decision. That decision was made by the CEO and the board of directors, and none of them got hurt. Delta fails, some people lose their investments. It might hurt investors, but do you think it's going to hurt the big investors? It'll hurt the people who have stock options in Delta because they've worked at Delta for 40 years. It'll hurt people whose 401ks or their day trader is invested in Delta for some reason. I don't know why anybody would at this point, but that's who it hurts. You're not going to hurt Delta. You want to do this to make a political statement? There are better ways to make a political statement. Elevate the voices in Georgia. Find local races to contribute to and support. Support them online. Support them by, if you're in Georgia, participate. Go out. Blanket areas. Put out pamphlets. Talk to people. If you're online, retweet local Georgia races. You retweet voices like Stacey Abrams who are pushing for a blue Georgia. That's what you do. That's where you put your energy. Instead of this nonsense about boycotting Georgia, it's not going to matter anyway. Now listen, I'm not saying that boycotting doesn't have an effect or an impact. I'm saying that there are better ways to do what you're trying to do, and that these boycotts that you think work, really, can you definitively say the boycott did anything? Now, you know when a boycott works? When it's small. Boycott Bob's Burgers. There's only one of them. You boycott him and no one in town eats his hamburgers anymore, he's going to change something. Or he's going to go out of business. Now, and it's a small business, you're not just hurting the people that work for Bob, you're hurting Bob. That hurts Bob. But your goal here isn't to drive Coca-Cola out of business. It's to get Coca-Cola to exert pressure on the Georgia government to make a change. And I'm here to tell you, it's not going to happen. It is not going to happen. It didn't happen in North Carolina. I'll say it again for effect. It did not happen in North Carolina. You can go on and on and on and on about how the boycotts helped North Carolina. You weren't boycotting companies in North Carolina. You were boycotting events in the state. And yeah, it may have had a small impact. But what made the impact was people voting for change. People voted for change. And they got it. But it's a whole different game now, guys. We're not dealing with a reasonable GOP anymore. We're not dealing with a GOP that has centrists anymore. We're dealing with Trump's GOP, filled with QAnon people and filled with racists and misogynists that really don't care anymore. And they'll do anything, and they'll say anything. And they're going to turn this into Democrats want Georgians to get laid off. Democrats want to destroy an American mainstay. Is that what you really want? Is that the message you're trying to send? Because they will spin this and you will lose. We worked hard to flip those Senate seats. And what did we get for it? Marjorie Taylor Greene. Think about that. That's what the State House is filled with. And you're worried about boycotting Delta. Worry about who's sitting in the State House. Worry about who's sitting in the gubernatorial mansion in Georgia. Don't worry about Delta. Delta's the least of your problems. Now you're going to do what you're going to do. Like I said, I'm not telling anybody, fly Delta. No, this is not an endorsement, man. It's me telling you that there are better ways to do what you're trying to do. Now, there are some retweets on my thread where people have talked about other things that you can do, voices you can elevate. Follow Stacey Abrams. She's a wealth of information on Georgia politics. Follow local Georgia officials, city officials, county officials, state officials, Democrats. They're the ones that you need to elevate and lift up. Pay attention. Be kind to one another. You know, I really need a way to sign these things off, and I haven't figured out what to say yet. I don't even know what to call these things. Finn's wisdom? I don't feel very wise most of the time. I don't know. I'll think about it. You guys let me know what you think. Have a great day.